I'm going with blue?
Ooh, that is some sweet vermilion if I've ever seen it. I like what you're thinking with the blue, though. It's closer to periwinkle.
Will you shut up about periwinkle?
Wow, that sucks, huh? Life is simply unfair, don't you think? However, I am a fair man in an unfair world, and you have yourself a video to do. But first, I need you both to sleep. When you wake, the analysis will begin. Pleasant dreams.
Where do mankind's inspirations come from? That was the question that led video game director and writer Kotaro Uchikoshi down the path of crafting a little game for the Nintendo DS, Zero Escape Volume 1, 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors. Filled to the brim with interesting characters and strong ambience, 999 might have appeared as a conventional game on the surface, but its narrative proved that simply wasn't the case. 999's greatest feat was its ability to wed video game storytelling to the DS's signature hardware in such a way that I've referred to as the pinnacle of immersive storytelling. Although 999 sales didn't hit astronomical numbers, critic and audience perceptions of the game were fairly high. An eventual iOS port was released, and Uchikoshi himself even expressed surprise about the game's sales performance. All of these variables eventually paved the way for Uchikoshi's next step for the Zero Escape franchise. " 2012 marked the release of Zero Escape Volume 2, Virtue's Last Reward, a title that was built upon the basis established by its DS predecessor for its release on the 3DS and PS Vita. Virtue's Last Reward contained more ambitious and thoughtful puzzles, a longer playtime, and a narrative that borrowed elements from 999, all while carving its own identity by opening the scale of the world. With these variables in consideration, as well as the wider access provided by the dual system release, it's no surprise that Virtue's Last Reward earned its spot as the fan-favorite entry in the series. Yet, Virtue's Last Reward didn't mark a definitive end to the story of series leads Akane, Junpei, Sigma, and Phi. This game concluded on a massive cliffhanger where the fate of 6 billion people and the subsequent future of humanity was left in the hands of Sigma and Phi, along with their ability to stop the deadly Radical 6 virus. A final Zero Escape entry seems like a guarantee. However, that future was not set in stone. Progress on the next project seemed to be moving at a normal pace, with Uchikoshi stating in an interview with Games Radar that the story was practically developed in his head, but still not in full production. Unfortunately, the news broke on February 13th, 2014 that Zero Escape Volume 3 was put on hold due to the low sales of the series in Japan. Fans were saddened to hear this announcement, but Uchikoshi seemed to be the most disheartened of all, expressing feelings of shame. In a similar fashion to those fueling Operation Rainfall and its desire to bring free JRPGs to the West, fans spread the word about their desire to see a third game brought to life through Operation Bluebird. I guess I'm no stranger to franchises with little hope for a future. It all sprung forth from that one final piece Uchikoshi left fans to hold on to. I believe there is still hope. Zero Escape 3 will definitely be released somehow. Someday. In the following year, rumors about Zero Escape's return began to resurface with a countdown found on 4affinity.co. At this time, fans were chomping at the bit as hard as I was for Snake to return to Smash Bros. Eventually, they discovered that the countdown aligned with Axis' game panel at Anime Expo 2015. As the event sprinted towards its conclusion, this happened. This is magic. Zero Escape Volume 3 would then earn its official name, Zero Time Dilemma, in addition to several trailers leading up to its late June 2016 release date. I initially embarked on my journey with the series in late 2015, so I completely evaded this entire period of highs and lows and waiting. But I didn't have to be there for me to say that Zero Time Dilemma's release was a miracle that was born from a passionate fan base. Okay, so that was a lot, and you might be thinking, Why did I just give a brief history lesson on the Zero Escape series when I'm focused on the final entry? And the primary reason is because the circumstances behind Zero Time Dilemma's creation heavily influenced the final product we have today, visually and structurally. Not to mention that the path we took to reach the series' ending is incredibly symbolic of Zero Escape as a whole. It's all about the journey and reaching that finish line, whether that ending satisfies you or leaves you craving more. That right there is essentially my sentiment regarding Zero Time Dilemma. This final entry's collection of endings contains some of the most significant moments in the entire series, and I wanted to take this video to explore each of the main endings. What makes them so excellent? How do they build upon the characters we know and love? Do they hit the mark? That's what we're here to discuss. One final disclaimer is that I'm going to be using footage from the PS4 version of the game. But aside from aesthetics, there's not any major changes unlike the different versions of 999. With that, it's time.
What will you do? Will you watch? Or play the game for yourself? The fate of this video hangs in the balance.
Within Zero Time Dilemma, there are a total of 32 endings, about 4 more than Virtue/Reward. Yes, that's right, 32 endings. Surprisingly, there are only 7 main endings, which is less than Virtue/Reward. Not counting the additional endings, that leaves us with 23 bad endings of varying length and emotional weight. Although that might sound ludicrous, it's actually perfect for the game's identity. I think anybody would tell you that Zero Time Dilemma is the darkest and goriest entry in the series. It features the greatest number of violent depictions, which range from mandatory acid baths to heads exploding. Furthermore, it's the only game where death is a necessity for progression. In 999, Junpei states that the Nonary game was designed in such a way that every person could have escaped. Virtue/Reward's Ambidex game allowed for each of its participants to escape together via allying as well. Zero Time Dilemma's take on the formula, the decision game, requires 6 deaths for escape to even be a possibility by this game's rules. Death is an integral part of Zero Time Dilemma. Some of these certainly teeter on the edge of absurdity, but they're not without reason. Zero Time Dilemma utilizes this excessive amount of violence to illustrate a dark tone and atmosphere, one that seems to try and make the player more thoughtfully consider their choices out of fear of witnessing one of the gruesome scenes. Those variables of fear and disgust are excellent tools for immersing the player into the narrative. Or they would be if other elements of the game didn't actively negate the efforts of these narrative devices. More on that later. Overall, all 23 of these bad endings collectively help establish the stakes and finality of the story. One of the hallmarks of Zero Time Dilemma's strongest endings is their ability to organically build off of character relationships and details established not only in this installment, but the previous entries. For that reason, I think understanding the stage and players involved in Zero Time Dilemma is necessary. Virtue/Reward ends with Sigma's consciousness being transferred back to the year 2029, where Akane debriefs him about the circumstances of the deadly Radical 6's release, what would become the setting of Zero Time Dilemma. Sigma and Phi's objectives are to infiltrate the Mars mission test site and stop the release of Radical 6, otherwise they will be fated to continue living this long, grueling cycle of recreating the Ambidex game merely for another attempt. As the end of the game states, the fate of humanity rests in their hands. Zero Time Dilemma also takes place a year after the events of 999, placing it in the center of the timeline. I find Zero Time Dilemma's position to be incredibly clever and thematic of the game's entire structure. Just like the true endings of the previous entries, the conclusion to the entire series is hidden in the place you might least expect it, which is the heart of the timeline. As a result, the cast has several returning faces in the form of our old protagonists and deuteragonists, in addition to a handful of new characters who all come together to compose 3 teams. Starting with C-Team, we have American hero and the greatest new character Carlos, frequent Hot Topic shopper Junpei, and Akane, who is back for round 3, but this time with a 100% less premeditated murder. Okay? You alright there?
Oh boy, where do I even begin? What is this, the animatronic show at Tomorrowland? Is this carousel of progress? Is Grandma gonna take off the VR headset and find out the game was never real? I've seen more emotion on the faces of ventriloquism puppets, and those things are terrifying. Swear to the big G above, this makes X-Arm look like a Ghibli movie. Freddy Fazbear looking ass.
Alrighty then. Quick side note, Kay actually makes a good point, and it's what I was referring to earlier. Structurally, Zero Time Dilemma has the makings of an immersive experience, but I find that the game's presentation detracts from it. Uchikoshi has cited Telltale's The Walking Dead as an inspiration for Zero Time Dilemma, and I can understand why that was alluring as the game taking 2012's Game of the Year showed its widespread appeal. I also find that the first 2 seasons of The Walking Dead legitimately convey great moments. The length of shots, camera angles, and the subtle animations that come with a more cinematic approach can elevate a narrative from good to outstanding. The issue is, and I'm not going to say The Walking Dead has been flawless performance-wise, that I don't think Zero Time Dilemma had a budget capable of producing a game the way it was fully envisioned. Character models are incredibly stiff, and that really pulls away from some of the more intense deliveries that the game offers. It leads to a disconnect between the voices and the characters themselves where it's hard to associate the two sometimes, and it can really break immersion. The presentation switch is the #1 complaint I hear about Zero Time Dilemma, and I consider it perfectly valid. Will the presentation bother everybody the same? Not at all. And can you get used to the presentation? Certainly, as I did and found great enjoyment in this game. However, it's hard not to think about what the game might have been like in the same style as its predecessors. Zero Time Dilemma also loves to use Dutch angles, as only a handful of shots actually appear to be aligned on the standard axes. Dutch angles are normally used to signal uneasiness and danger. 2 elements, as previously mentioned, form the core identity of Zero Time Dilemma. I personally prefer that Dutch angles be used sparingly rather than a stylistic choice, but I'd certainly be hard-pressed to argue that they don't fit the tale spun by Zero Time Dilemma, unlike the original 4 movie where they feel terribly out of place. From a gameplay perspective, I saw nothing wrong with the presentation of the first 2 volumes, but I can understand how pressure for the game to succeed as well as Uchikoshi's own desires would impact the final product. That being said, I will call to attention well-executed cinematic decisions when they appear within these endings. Anyways, where were we?
Yeah, that'd be D-Team, old buddy, old pal.
Oh, right, thanks, Kay. Wait a minute!
Easy there, not here to make a scene. I'll just be chilling on the sofa and listening.
Oh, well, sure. Yeah, I can work with that. So, yeah, that brings us to D-Team, or as I like to call it, the Get Shit Done Squad. The protagonist of Virtue/Reward, Sigma, whose 67-year-old consciousness is in his 22-year-old body, yeah, it's as weird as it sounds, his partner in crime, Phi, and her strangely new orange eyebrows, I'm sure that's not important, and Diana, an absolute sweetheart that looks like she styles her wardrobe after Mr. Rogers. Finally, we have Q-Team. That includes the newcomers Q, Mira, and Eric.
She's a serial killer. The Heart Ripper.
Mira is my angel!
Oh, man, I just had the worst dream ever. There was a snail and some dude with a blonde Justin Bieber cut toting around a shotgun. Oh no.
Oh, dibs! Dibs on this team!
Kay, maybe that's not such a good idea.
Well, hey there, little buddy. What's your name?
I don't know.
Aw, it's okay. I know how it feels to lose your memory and be stuck in a piece of armor.
You still are!
But don't you worry. I'll look after you. I hereby declare this collective group of misfits K-Team. Together, we'll make the greatest team the world has ever seen. Yeah, I can see it now. Alright, K-Team. Let's get to puzzling!
Yeah!
Whoa!
Okay.
Alright, let's... No, Blondie, stop sniffing the pretty lady's hair.
What?
Come on, let's go! Let's do this!
Wow.
Yeah!
Oh my gosh!
Puzzles! Alright!
Well, can't say I didn't try. What I can appreciate is that every character is here for different reasons, some of which are made apparent through a sense of sincerity, while others are concealed. Junpei joined the project to finally see Akane again after tracking her down for the entire year following the events of 999. Akane, Phi, and Sigma, although on separate teams, plan to search for the source of Radical 6. Carlos and Diana are there for the $500,000 they would receive for participation, and for good reason. The list goes on. The setup for Zero Time Dilemma is an aspect I regard as rather strong and shows a lot of promise. promise that can be seen through the wide selection of endings. Back on the topic of bad endings, this game has a lot that provide insight into the character's motivations and a couple what-if scenarios. If you look at the list of main endings for Zero Time Dilemma, there's only one ending for C-Team. Given the significance of Akane and Junpei to Zero Escape's core narrative, it feels immensely strange. The truth behind this bizarre occurrence lies in the fact that this ending serves as a crux for the crossroads of several other teams, and most of C-Team's development precedes it. Their grandiose moments are scattered amongst a smattering of bad endings and timelines escaped via shifting, the transporting of one's consciousness from one existence to another. For starters, let's take the decision game presented in Control as an example. The end of the puzzle room is rife with danger as carbon dioxide begins flooding into the room with the only form of salvation materialized as a gas mask hidden within one of the lockers. After selecting a locker, Zero allows you to choose between your original pick or one other locker. Thus, the player is introduced to the deadliest game of Deal or No Deal. Picking incorrectly offers a standard bad ending that doesn't necessarily bring anything new to the surface, but selecting the locker with the mask paves the way to one of the game's most emotionally gripping segments. Prior to this moment, the presentation of C-Team has been interesting, to say the least. Akane and Junpei are characters who we are intimately versed in, with one being a kind soul buried in circumstances, consequently causing them to be consumed by the desire to complete their goals, and the other as a sarcastic individual with a heart of gold and a genuine concern for others. Really, Carlos is the only outlier here as an unknown entity and therefore seems the least trustworthy. Yet Zero Time Dilemma completely flips this, with Carlos somehow portrayed as the most stable individual, being a down-to-earth firefighter with that heart of gold I saw in 999 Junpei. The new Junpei, however, is kind of an asshole.
5 X-Passes were released. The only one left to die is Phi from D-Team, and then we...
Junpei!
While I can understand that the years searching for Akane deeply scarred him, the whiplash in how much he's changed is jarring, even when you look at Tenmyoji from Virtue's Last Reward. As for Akane, she doesn't emit that aura of confidence and control of Virtue's Last Reward, so her more passive personality from 999 takes the forefront, but even more so here, as she still had that subtle air of duplicity beneath the surface in 999. With this team composition, it's a recipe for disaster. But back on the subject of Control, I think the conclusive moment allows for each character to shine in the way players know them. Junpei, caring for Akane more than anything, and Carlos as a devout firefighter, sacrificed themselves to give Akane the mask, all to the tune of a new arrangement of a familiar song. Morphogenetic sorrow is what I'd consider to be the main theme of the Zero Escape trilogy, as its motif permeates numerous songs, and it's the first melody players would hear if they started all the way back with 999. Yet I'd also say it's Junpei and Akane's theme, the only characters to have appeared in all 3 entries. Morphogenetic sorrow is a beautiful backdrop to this scene, and I also adore this tender conversation between the 999 duo. I realize Junpei and Akane's history with the bunnies is a moment that defines an aspect of their connection, but it can make their relationship feel shallow when it's the only memory they have to talk about, which does happen a handful of times. The decision to have Junpei reflect on a new memory, one where they went to a festival and Akane picked out masks, not only gives added depth to their relationship, but is relevant to the events on screen. The majority of shots only feature Akane and Junpei in the frame too, keeping the scene focused on what's important. As Junpei and Carlos pass out, we see a ring skid across the floor unceremoniously, which is actually one of the sequence's biggest details. That ring brings us to the rec room, where things get a bit dicey. Get it? Because you roll the dice.
Oh, Comedy King over here. High five, buddy.
All right. Imagine you're playing Yahtzee. And somebody tells you, okay, so you need to roll a 3 of a kind, and they all have to be 1s. And the next thing you know, they put a gun to your head.
Dingleberry soup! Bippity boppity, motherfucker!
And by gun, I mean 3 Gatling guns. That's the situation we get here, and understandably so, Junpei is very upset.
What the hell is this shit?
But he says that there is still something he needs to say. This brief moment serves as extra scaffolding for the control room, but the completed structure isn't realized until a sequence that involves a series of shifts. The reemergence of the old Junpei putting Akane first, and Carlos realizing that this was the worst couple to potentially third wheel.
Carlos and I will protect you and die. The fuck?
Following the insanity, Akane and Junpei have a heart-to-heart discussion that I think does an excellent job of highlighting both of them. Akane, as a more calculated individual, is reasonably disappointed that Junpei would take such a risk, and Junpei, as a person driven heavily by emotion, initially fails to see the consequences of a seemingly selfless action. During their disagreement, plenty of close-up shots that juxtapose the two are used, offering a level of affinity, but over-the-shoulder and two shots are thrown into the mix as well. Typically, both of these shots are used to showcase intimacy between the characters, which certainly fits the care for one another these two express in the moment, and culminates into Junpei's hasty proposal. Stuff like Junpei putting the ring on the wrong hand and his awkward response are very much in character. And those, in addition to the other moving parts, make this one of my favorite moments of the trilogy. And what's crazy to think is that this game still has so many more, and that ring still serves a purpose as a method of orienting the player on the timeline. C-Team has been the center of discussion for a while, so I think it's about time to change gears to D-Team, with their first ending, Circle of Fate. Following their departure from manufacturing, Diana initiates a conversation with Sigma about the robots, which stirs up a deep inspection into his past, the one leading up to Virtue's Last Reward. It's a very wholesome conversation that helps the player to sympathize with Sigma, but there are several notable factors at play. First, the way Sigma talks is not like that of the Sigma we know from Virtue's Last Reward. He's much more reflective and expresses feelings we know his 22-year-old self never experienced. Next, Sigma mentions an individual named D, who helped him develop his projects and kept him company in his time of loneliness. Yet, she passed away, and became the inspiration for everybody's favorite robot from Virtue's Last Reward, Luna. It's never explicitly said in this conversation, but it's fairly obvious that Diana and Luna share a lot of similar traits in their medical background, red hair, and reserved nature. Which brings us to the third point, the cinematography. Paralleling Junpei and Akane's heart-to-heart, these two are framed through a plentiful amount of close-ups, two-shots, and over-the-shoulder shots to subtly hint at a burgeoning relationship. I also appreciate the tracking wide shot to accompany Sigma's tale of solitude. As far as team composition goes, D-Team is probably the most stable off the bat, likely as a result of Sigma and Phi's connection from Virtue's Last Reward, as well as Sigma's secret feelings. That concern culminates into a clever plan to use the bomb for manufacturing to blow a hole for escape. The problem is, Zero doesn't like that plan. Yeah, Zero put Q-Team on the other side of the door, which forces D-Team to sacrifice each of them to escape, or attempt to move the bomb. Wait. Q-Team. Oh my god, K!
Just the man I was looking for. Listen, gang. Birdman hopped on the PA to tell us that KT might be in a bit of a pickle, since there's a bomb out here. Would you believe it? Did you check up on that for me? No rush, though.
Holy shit. Yes, K, there's a bomb.
Good golly gracious!
It's okay. Just stay calm and, Wait. Aren't you in the elevator room?
Well, I looked around and saw some writing on the wall, and if I, Thanatos, sever her lies, is an anagram for this here is an elevator, then yes, this is indeed an elevator.
Take the elevator!
Oakley dokley.
When making the decision to run away, Sigma will stay behind to try and save Q-Team, and just as Zero Time Dilemma makes clear through the imagery of a simple, solitary snail, one action can lead to a ripple effect. From what Virtue's Last Reward left the player with, the main objective of Zero Time Dilemma was to prevent Radical 6 from spreading. Where is it? How can we stop it? How did the Radical 6 outbreak even begin? That's the looming thought that consumes the player's faculties as they are attempting to escape the bunker. Completing some of Q-Team's chapters will reveal that Mira snuck a syringe of the deadly virus out of the biolab. Yeah, go figure it was Mira. So the only connection the player has to the virus is her. Sigma tried his best to save Q-Team, but unfortunately, Zero Time Dilemma said it best. Life is simply unfair. Sigma loses an eye as well as both of his arms from the blast, and Phi is injected with Radical 6 by Mira. All of this led by an incredibly well done performance rife with shock and horror by Karen Strassman. But even with all of that, this moment is not portrayed in a grandiose light. The fact that the creation of Patient Zero wasn't a massive moment that defined a large part of Zero Time Dilemma admittedly rubbed me the wrong way at first. However, after considering it for several years, it makes sense. Again, this narrative is obsessive over the notion that the smallest, most insignificant variable can lead to untold disasters, and this might be the most exemplary instance in the game. Zero Time Dilemma will sacrifice the chance at an absolutely momentous occasion if it means staying true to its themes, a notion I'll cover in depth much later. I can appreciate this twist, but that's not to say I don't have my gripes. Unless I'm misunderstanding how end or beginning from Virtue/Reward factors into the timelines, Sigma should be aware of how Radical 6 spread, but Akane mentions that they don't know. He was there as Diana made the choice to try and save Phi and Sigma. The other critique I have is that Radical 6's release this close to the escape doesn't allow for us to see the toll it will reap directly. On one hand, we had plenty of exposure to it in Virtue/Reward, so the narrative certainly didn't have to be defined by it. Yet the sheer terror brought by Radical 6's presence crafted some of the series' strongest moments, and it would have been a brilliant way to further the dire nature of Zero Time Dilemma's narrative. That being said, the post-injection conversation where they slowly realize that the timeline they now exist on is the history which connects to Virtue/Reward is phenomenal. If Morphogenetic Sorrow is Junpei and Akane's theme, Bluebird Lamentation is Sigma and Phi's, and this was the perfect time to evoke memories of their respective game. It was a simple act of charity that unleashed a worldwide pandemic. Diana was the one that made the decision to save Phi and Sigma at the expense of the world, and as she gives her infamous proclamation over the radio, a red light covers her face, signifying the mass bloodshed and violence that now falls on her, closing the curtains on the Circle of Fate ending.
No, that's not quite right. Not just them. Not just these 6. All of them. All 6 billion. Soon, I will have killed 6 billion people.
Although I have pointed out a couple of things that I personally see as missteps within these endings, the purpose behind this entire discussion was always to illustrate how brilliant Zero Time Dilemma is with weaving its endings in a cohesive fashion. Despite the stage being set for Virtue/Reward, this is the finale to the series, and one that needs to tie up as many threads as it can to its predecessors in conjunction with the mysteries it's crafted itself. How did Akane and Junpei get to where they are in Virtue/Reward? And who the hell is Zero this time? These questions are the subject of the next main ending, Apocalypse. Taking place in the same timeline as the one where D-Team has escaped, Akane and Junpei find themselves in Ward D, waiting on Carlos's promised return. If you hadn't looked at the timeline, this sequence is wonderfully executed in how it seeks to slowly reveal the player's exact position. The broken door, the threshold filled with debris, and the bomb in the decontamination room, they all build towards Zero's broadcast where he reveals a laundry list of items, all to the bone-chilling tune of Anxiousness. First, he is Brother, the leader of Free the Soul, but the strangest piece of information, Zero released the virus to stop an even greater threat from happening at the hands of a religious fanatic. Zero Escape has always been a series that has dealt with the morality of one's motives, even if they were for a good cause, and Akane is usually the instigator of these scenarios. That's why I love her character so much, and it's fantastic to see Zero using that against her with the utilization of full high-angle shots to exhibit their insignificance in the grand scheme of things. Pointing out the hypocritical stance that Akane takes, plus the butterfly effect that transformed Akane from an ordinary child to the cold, driven woman we know, superbly links each game under this umbrella of injustice. Okay, I've certainly fought it before, but holy crap, writing this section made me realize the ridiculous amount of information these games pack within the confines of a single segment. Anyways, the final reveal is that Brother was born in the facility, transported back to the year 1904, and most importantly, Brother has a younger sister, one we know very well. This is when Zero Time Dilemma begins to peak. Not only is this entire conversation unbelievably intense and helpful for answering some questions, it only provides half answers, making way for increased speculation. When I originally played this game in 2016, this segment was a personal highlight. And Carlos, the MVP, coming to help his buddies out because he's just the best, undoubtedly helped. But what I'd consider to be the game's strongest moment is still to come. The Hope of 2 is a hefty stretch of cutscenes, but the final product is truly stupendous and one that acts as the threshold to the game's finale. In the timeline where Phi has been killed in the furnace, which was a horrifying callback to 999, Sigma and Diana are stuck within the facility with only one manner of escape: the transport pods. The decision to destroy the machine leads to a standard bad ending, but choosing the transport leads to the true content tucked away. Transporting at first doesn't seem to change anything. The pods practically function as a fax machine, so digital copies of the two are sent to the selected travel point, but the originals remain where they are. Although seemingly useless at first, this outcome leads to what I'd contend is one of the game's most interesting philosophical quandaries. Why are the consciousness they know forced to abide by whatever fate has in store? In this case scenario, remain behind. Zero Time Dilemma loves to visit this theme, but it's in brief conversations from time to time that can feel pretty separate when not put under a lens. C-Team's discussion of the anthropic principle is another example of this subject. The topic of fate marvelously paves the way for the most real feeling moment within the narrative. Diana and Sigma are stuck within the test site. Akane has escaped, and the decision game has ended. The only hope these two have is to wait. But Sigma's beliefs seem to have already vanished, and Diana's optimism can only last for so long. What this presents us with is a beautiful examination of two characters and how they choose to live out their life with an expiration date in sight. It's deliberately slow-paced, using a blend of wide shots and close-ups to show the ever-fluctuating mental state of these two characters as they try their best to accept their reality. The wide shots emit feelings of agoraphobia and insignificance, while the close-ups allow for intimacy and connection to the feelings of suffocation expressed by Diana and Sigma. Diana, in particular, gets to shine tremendously here as she slowly plummets into this crazed state that serves as a direct opposition to the warm presence we're accustomed to. She's never experienced this level of solitude and isolation, but Sigma has, as his 67-year-old consciousness went through it to prepare the AB game. This makes him a perfect foil to her, as he can be the cool-headed individual that is able to relate to her struggles, which is portrayed through his calm delivery. Yet he never fully helps her, and for a reason that he elaborates on later. Why I describe it as the most real feeling sequence is because we see the mindsets of these characters, especially Diana, alter drastically over the course of just a couple days. She initially begins contemplative and occasionally brash, knocking on the door, begging for help in one moment, and lost in her thoughts in the shower in the next. I've experienced those feelings of insecurity and uneasiness, and sometimes it's hard to consider how rapidly your mind can flip from happy to sad. 2 weeks later, she seems to have escaped her state, as it gives her space from the things in life she tried to escape by entering the experiment in the first place. Diana's mention of abducted children might be a small reference to the original Nonary games as well. In her mind, ignorance is bliss, but I think some of what she's saying is understandable to a degree. Those light jabs at social media, I can see where she's coming from. I need to give credit to the music as well, as it signifies how Diana feels at a given time. Glacial solitude for when she's lost, nostalgic scenery for when there's peace, it all works. And Sigma's bitter moments at the end of the scene carve the way to the eventual decline of Diana's mental state. 1 month later, Diana has returned to a heightened state of frustration in what she puts as everything feeling the same, day in and day out. Something that I feel that I could relate to a lot back when I was in college. To feel that way without the ability to go where you wanted to, I couldn't even imagine that. When Sigma tries to talk with Diana, this is where we really get to see him cracking as he reveals information that he tried to keep hidden, detailing Diana's experiences with her abusive husband and reason for joining the test. This is the time that I wish the models were more expressive so we could see how Diana is processing the information as Sigma is laying it out. A month and a half in, those feelings of desperation continue to eat away at her until it reaches a boiling point with Diana in a drunken stupor. This cutscene embodies that ever-changing mindset of hers into a few moments, with her desire for isolation, sex, and death all happening in the span of a couple minutes. It's pretty heartbreaking. Sigma finally confesses that he recognized her suffering, but never reached out due to a fear of getting too close and losing her again. That newfound connection leads to, oh my.
Hey, Kay, I finally found you guys. What's been going? Oh, sweet Jiminy Christmas, that's sex.
Yeah, don't look at that. What follows is a touching conversation with intimately placed camera angles and tracking shots to act as a follow-up to their conversation in the healing room, and a chance for Sigma to fully open up, showing how the relationship has grown. However, the real kicker comes 3 months later to a scene that lasts less than 30 seconds. Cut to the date 11/16/2029, which is actually information that is needed for a puzzle on another route, and I love that. But Diana gives birth to twins, 1 boy and 1 girl. The cutscene will begin to slowly reveal information as it continues, but the reveal of twins and Diana's pregnancy begins to put a lot of what Zero said in Apocalypse into perspective. 2 proud parents, at least for a bit. The realization is that they don't have any more food, and they should transport their children now that the pods have recharged. Alright, this is where it gets Sigma tells the dog with them, named Gab, that they are out of food and says goodbye. Like, see ya, dog, you're gonna starve now. But that also means that Sigma, Diana, and 2 infants will also starve to death.
The fuck? What now?
Holy shit, that might be the darkest thing in the story. Before sending them off, Diana and Sigma name the 2 children and give them each Diana's Bluebird cage and Phi's brooch. The scene closes on 2 parents standing next to each other, unsure of what comes next, closing out the hope of 2 ending. This is the time that the player is likely freaking out because all of the clues are in their face to piece it together. I certainly had that feeling after several moments of brief uncertainty. What do these clues point towards? The Phi we know is the child of Sigma and Diana, and Delta, the mysterious child, is somewhere out there. The Phi point can also be proven through Phi's remark about her hair being dyed and her newly orange eyebrows in Zero Time Dilemma. I did not expect that to actually pay off, but here we are. But what about Delta? There are several major clues that can help the player here. First, the anagram on the wall that comes out to "Together with me, we are 10" has 5 leftover letters: D-E-L-T-A. Somehow, Akane is able to solve it, despite being puzzled by the extra letters. Finally, we have a bonus ending as a potential path from the crossbow route. The first of Q Team's endings, What is Love, clarifies information on Mira, if her absolutely psychotic tendencies weren't enough, but contains one of the game's 2 bonus endings. See, the study ends in a freeway Mexican standoff between the members after seeing a card that states only 1 more has to die. Your decision, as the boy, is to select a target to shoot. Eric will give you the traditional ending, Mira will end abruptly, not shooting will lead to explosive results, but there lies a hidden 4th route. Perhaps in an attempt to commit suicide, the player will enter Me, or Q. However, doing so will present you with this startling prompt: enter Q's real name. At this point, you might not have the answer and choose instead to come back later once the reveal is made that the boy you are playing as is actually a robot based on a boy named Sean. Alright, so it has to be Sean.
Are you sure about that?
This boy you've believed to be the leader is in fact not the Q we thought he was, which leaves the question, who is Q? This is where all the previous evidence comes into effect, as entering the name Delta will result in Sean turning to the camera, apologizing, and shooting before a man grunts and speaks an eerie Latin phrase.
Addendum Forasca Venusca Ova. This is yet another destiny.
The use of an untempered shot similar to the way the game has always presented itself makes this direction especially creepy, but it's also unsettling to think that Delta, the 10th member, has been here the entire time. This mysterious individual's presence was teased in a number of ways that I think are as subtle, if not more so, than the allusions to Sigma's age in Virtue/Reward. First is the appearance of an extra shadow in several shots. The reason that I love this particular method is because it utilizes a feature specific to Zero Time Dilemma, which is the cinematic camera angles. It could be argued that this twist could have worked in the still frames found in 999 in Virtue/Reward, but I think that this direction is more organic as you have less time to absorb your surroundings in these quick shots, and the movement of characters can draw your eyes away from subtle details like these shadows. This one is harder to notice as it likely happens before Sean's identity as a robot is revealed, but during Q-Team's execution, there are 3 piles of blood and guts. But if Sean is a robot, there should only be 2. Or how about the fact that Carlos doesn't recognize the robot despite the fact that he should know who he is if they were in decomp together? The extra thump when Q-Team hits the ground to sleep, the portrait inconsistencies in the status menu, some dialogue explicitly mentioning an old man in a wheelchair. So many hints were placed, and this is only the beginning. There's a wonderful Reddit post crafted by Mega0x7 that lists dozens of teases, and I'd strongly recommend checking it out. Once we get out of this shelter, at least. Damn it. Sorry. As I was saying, it's this high level of connectivity and provision of bite-sized information that I believe elevates Zero Time Dilemma. These endings, although very distinct and separated by path, are connected magnificently through these small hints and teases. As a result, Zero Time Dilemma, despite potential plot holes from previous entries, feels like a competently written game that is quite cohesive. But all of this brings us to... Kay? Yo, what the hell happened, dude?
Kay, get away from these 3. They are complete psychopaths.
I tried the... Go on.
This lady is bing-banging crazy. She started carving out Blondie's heart, going on about feeling warmth. Ugh. Absolute lunatic, let me tell you. And you, I trusted you. You were supposed to be my little amnesiac buddy.
I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry.
No, I'm sorry. It's too late for that. And you. Oh, you are the worst of the bunch, Blondie.
Huh?
Mr. I'll have her back by 10, sir. Over here's what you get when you give a person the mental stability of a ferret hopped up on 17 cups of coffee. I don't think I've ever felt hate before. But if this is what it feels like, I think I want to punch him.
What the hell did I just... Did you come from another timeline?
No. What? Time travel? No.
Don't lie to me.
Okay, technically, I guess if you wanted to stretch, might have dipped my toes in the kiddie pool for a little bit.
God damn it, Kay. Alright, well, since you're here, we might as well tackle this next part together. The real Zero. The second Q-Team ending brings us to a very strange location in the flowchart, one that converges individuals from at least 3 different timelines. There are those that were present on this timeline originally, like Sean and a trigger-happy Eric that might have seen Mira's corpse strangled to death, Sigma and Diana, who are the versions that were transported back during the hope of 2 divergence, and finally a version of Carlos that is just so hopped up on the idea of shifting that it's so hilarious. As we saw previously, giving the man that could become overly aggressive a lethal weapon doesn't make for the best situation, and somebody is probably gonna die. Remember how Carlos just so happened to go back and wait for close to a year just to save Akane and Junpei? Alright, get this. Carlos shifted from the timeline with the violent Sean bot and decides to shift to another timeline and go back in time 10 months to use the transporter. And he did it just so he can meet Junpei and Akane, and when he's told that he could have stopped 6 billion people from dying, he just has the funniest reaction to the game by far.
What happened today is going to result in 6 billion people.
That Carlos is this one, and he just starts talking about shifting like he's a superhero in front of Eric to the point where he literally goads the madman into shooting him. This was the origin of that trailer line that made me think he was gonna be insane, and it just so happens to be the funniest part of the game.
No! Carlos!
Don't worry, I won't die.
Okay, well, I got off track, so let's speed this up. For a process of elimination and the correct name input by the player, the cast is greeted with the reality that Delta was not the blind or deaf individual they thought he was. The player is also presented their first look at the character, a slender old man with piercing purple eyes, as well as the reality that Delta is Zero the Second. Zero Time Dilemma in of itself is an anagram that translates to me, I'm Zero, I'm Delta. It was on the cover of the game the entire time. Delta's initial reveal, as well as the first-person perspective from the bonus ending, contribute to the divulgation that he has been monitoring the various groups through his glasses, another way that Zero Time Dilemma justifies its switch in presentation. This ending has a very shocking sequence with the seemingly random death of several cast members, but the most chilling in the camera's slow zoom in on Delta, accompanied by a single word: Mom. Well, we're here. Zero Time Dilemma's true ending. Payoff 2. Use the parallel payoff from the coin flip in the game's formative moments. With each member of the group assembled and caught up to speed, whether by means of shifting, data upload, or secondhand knowledge, each team's objective is clear: to unlock the last Force Quit box with the Mother's 2 mementos. But first, Delta would like to present the biggest joked on moment of this game: complex motives. Okay, let's break down complex motives. Delta's objective with the decision game can be broken into 2 parts. The first of these is to secure his and Phi's existence as it currently stands. Although players are likely aware of Phi and Delta's connection to Diana and Sigma before so, it's clearly laid out that the entirety of this game was created to ensure the twins were born. The reason it was handled in such a specific manner was to guarantee that Phi would retain her shifting abilities and Delta his mind-hacking ones, which we'll discuss shortly. Although there's not an incredibly powerful emotional moment here, Bluebird Lamentation is such a moving melody on its own that it amplifies the context of the scene. Yet, everything is interrupted when Phi decides to approach with an aggressive neutral air and the shelter self-destruct sequence is activated with the Force Quit box. Here is where it gets interesting. Delta might not be able to shift like his family, but mind hacking allows for him to read the minds of other people, and this allows for him to understand what timeline he exists in. The other ability is one where he can control someone's actions briefly, which he uses to make Eric shoot him. Mind hacking was actually set up in the narrative previously, with Diana pressing the button but not understanding why she did it, or Eric killing the people in the real Zero ending. Now, the reason the Force Quit box leads to a self-destruct sequence is to force the teams to make what Zero Time Dilemma seems to tout as the largest decision. Should the group shift to the timeline where they won the coin flip and sacrifice their existences in another timeline or not? Doing so will result in everyone escaping the bunker and Delta laying out the second part of his complex motives: stopping the religious fanatic. Remember, Radical 6 was released to secure a 75% chance at wiping out the fanatic instead of risking the entirety of humanity, and I actually love how smug Delta gets when the group is upset that events will end poorly despite all their efforts. The main cast's promises of determination to stop the fanatic are admittedly a nice addition to inject some level of optimism, and I do love the final lines of the game's dialogue delivered by Delta, as it's emblematic of the entire trilogy. My primary issue with mind hacking, the choice to shift or not, and Delta's plan to find the fanatic are that none of these ideas seem fleshed out enough. If we look at the primary concepts from 999 and Virtue/Reward like morphogenetic fields and the identity of Zero, these are explored heavily and multiple times in a way that reinforce their importance to the narrative's conclusion. Zero Time Dilemma has conversations on each of these topics, like I mentioned with Diana and Eric for mind hacking, but also C-Team's funny, copyright-avoiding discussion of Back to the Future and the morality of trading existences with someone. The issue is that Akane, and actually very in character I'd say, tells Carlos that it's not an issue. It's something you have to accept with shifting. Carlos certainly takes this to heart with his bizarre shifting adventure shortly after, so this final decision barely feels like a decision, especially when not shifting presents you with a bad ending. It's an attempt at a moral quandary when the game has not given enough development for me to believe that not shifting could ever be the correct answer here. As for Delta's plan, the fanatic gets a bit more attention in the biolab and the apocalypse ending, which is a good start. It's crazy to think that the entire series, all of the suffering, pain, and relationships that occurred, multiple timelines, some of which spanned over 50 years, were all building towards Delta's plan of uniting these people under a single purpose. And I have to give props to the writers for making Delta seem cunning and competent enough to picture the entire decision game to such a degree that he made the initial game a coin flip with a shot at victory just so a timeline with his dream in mind could be imagined. Similar to my other gripes, I simply wish the Fanatic or Radical 6 were given more development over this narrative. There is one more thing about this ending that, while I completely understand its connection to Zero Time Dilemma's themes, is overridden by how it doesn't sit right with me. Ending a narrative on a scene that is open to interpretation is completely fine, especially when said narrative constantly pushes this idea of making pretentious decisions. Personally, I don't believe that Carlos holding Delta at gunpoint is a satisfying or even well-shot conclusion to the entire series' narrative. I had mentioned that a limitation of Zero Time Dilemma can be its stiff models and consequential lack of impact. But let's say that this scene remained the series' conclusion. Following the shot of Carlos raising his gun, I think a slow tracking close-up shot straight down his extended arm, down the barrel of the gun, and ending in an extreme close-up shot of his face, with him potentially closing his eyes in nervousness only before cutting to black, could act as a possible revision to greatly bolster the effectiveness of this ending. My preferred way to end this series would be this revision followed by what I believe to be one of the game's greatest ideas: logs that wrap up each character's arcs. The idea is wonderful, but the implementation leaves much to be desired. D-Team doesn't have one to my knowledge, and Q-Teams I personally find to be a little too romanticized and unrealistic, but perhaps it's because I just don't like these characters, and busting a serial killer out of a jail seems highly unethical. C-Teams, however, are beautiful and give me further wholesome Carlos content, but also more of those genuine moments between Akane and Junpei that I want to see. Additionally, it depicts how Carlos is still in their lives and shows that at least a great friendship blossomed out of all of the insanity. If there's anything realistic that I would like to be done with Zero Escape at this point, it's to have this scene acted out by Rena Strober, Evan Smith, Andrew Bowen, and Julia Aram. Zero Time Dilemma's ending left me feeling hollow, and not in the sense that it emotionally rocked me. The way the pieces fit together just doesn't sit right with me as the conclusion to the series I love so much. Even if 999 happened to be the only entry with its cliffhanger ending, it at least provides the route for a more positive outcome without the existence of a religious fanatic on the run. And apparently, I wasn't alone in thinking this way. In an interview with Uchikoshi found in Nintendo Power, he had this to say about his approach to games. But even then, I write my stories with the intention that they will be extremely entertaining, so I like to leave questions behind. I mean, who knows, that mystery might become a good part of the story. I guess, in a sense, I'm taking a big risk. As I mentioned, Uchikoshi did exactly this. There were questions left behind. Did Carlos shoot Delta? Did they catch the fanatic? Although I personally find that the risk didn't quite satisfy me, I respect his decision to stick to his guns and see his vision through. It's that vision that provided me with one of my favorite series of all time and a small game that changed how I view narratives in the medium of video games. Zero Time Dilemma is a game that was cut from the same cloth as Volumes 1 and 2, but stitched to be displayed differently, and I think that's evident as early as the introduction. 999 and Virtue's Last Reward begin with chilling renditions of morphogenetic sorrow before transitioning into an intense techno arrangement to illustrate the dual nature of their respective plots, one of unease and hope. Zero Time Dilemma's opening does not follow suit. The non-stop imagery of gore and violence along a constantly epic arrangement, to me, is the first sign that this game is going to be perceived in a different way than its predecessors. The Enneagram-centered characters, escape the room-styled narrative and gameplay, and those heartfelt character moments, they're all still here. And for the most part, I do think that Zero Time Dilemma is a competently written game with an extraordinary amount of care and concern put into the way that its endings function. At its core, it's still Zero Escape, but perhaps not the entry people wanted, and I can respect that. I adore this game, but I do have more issues with it than either of the first two installments. In the end, I'm just happy we got it at all.
Well, buddy, looks like this is it. It's been a pleasure.
Whoa, Kate, where are you going, dude?
We've just covered the third game. I'm sure you know how to count, but there's only 3 in a trilogy. Right?
Hey, slow down, man. Zero Time Dilemma does end on a cliffhanger, one where there's no more material in sight, and it's up to you to fill in the blanks. Given that this is the last and final game in the series for me to cover, it might be of the opinion that I'll follow suit with this being my last video on the series. But I'm not done here. There are so many aspects, characters, and moments left to discuss that I wouldn't be happy ending it here. So unlike Zero Time Dilemma, this certainly isn't the end.
You mean there's more?
Yeah! Hell yeah. That is my final decision. Hello there, everybody. I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for watching this video. This is the longest video that I've put out on my channel, and I would go as far as to say the most ambitious one that I've ever done, but I really wanted to make sure that I did this right. For that reason, if you did enjoy this video or any of my other Zero Escape videos, it would really mean a lot if you left a like on this video and considered subscribing to the channel. Also, please be sure to go check out all of the different people that lended their voice work to this video and made my dream turn into a reality. Brandon, Kaelora, Mappy the Squire, who I've worked with previously on the Virtue's Last Reward video, and I always love working with him. Definitely please go check out their social links. They are in the credits here. As I mentioned, this is not the end. There are a lot of other things with Zero Escape that I do want to talk about in the future, and hopefully not as long as the wait as this. Today is also Zero Time Dilemma's 5th anniversary, which is crazy to think about. I've played for the game a couple times here at this point, but it just doesn't feel like it's been 5 years. And although I did point out some things that I personally take issue with this game, I do still really enjoy it, and I want to thank Uchikoshi and the rest of the team for bringing this game to life as well as just the rest of the series. I love this series to death, and my perception of video game narratives would be completely different without Zero Escape. But I think that takes care of everything I really need to say, so thank you guys for all your continued support. Thank you for watching this video, and until next time.